All right, so hi. I'm Dan, and this is Holden.
I'm Holden.
And we're unfortunately making a podcast that we're calling Singing at Brick Walls, which we decided on last night. I am, and you should probably know this if you're watching it, but I feel like for posterity, I should say, I am the singer and songwriter and creator of Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties. Holden has a wild CV, right? You work at The New Yorker, you work at Pitchfork, you're writing a book for 33 1/3. What am I missing?
These things are all true. Wrote about the Wonder Years for Pitchfork, which is how Dan and I know each other.
He's just one of the more thoughtful people I know when it comes to like processing and understanding and thinking about music and art and narrative, and the person that I wanted to host this, even though right now it seems like I'm hosting it. I am going to kick it to you. It's just, I think that the question came up with the label and everybody, like, why do you want to make a podcast about this or a limited series or whatever you want to call it? And I kept pitching it to them like the same way. I'm like, it's going to be like The Talking Dead. But mea culpa here, like I've never seen The Walking or Talking Dead. I think I just kind of generally understand that it is like an interview show with the people that made it. What I've gleaned from it.
It's not for either of us to say.
Presumably. And so I was like, I think about this band and this project so much like television, and every record is a season and every song is an episode. And I think that it would be very useful to, every time we release a single, release one of these episodes where we talk about that single in depth. So I think that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. And Dan and I can talk for 12 hours about any song. So we're excited.
Yeah, we're going to have to self-edit.
Exactly. But let's just start off by talking about the record, In Lieu of Flowers. And our first episode is the title track.
Yes.
Also called In Lieu of Flowers.
Yeah, that's how title tracks go.
Yes, it is named after.
I used to be very averse to title tracks.
Really?
Yeah, not for any particular reason.
You just wanted to come up with a new
I just thought
idea.
everything should have its own idea, yeah. But now I love a title track.
Yeah. Well, so I would love to talk about how you came to the title, why this song gets the title track, why that lyric was sort of pulled out and given to the project, and what it sort of means for where Aaron is in his journey.
Sure. So I think we talked about this before, but I think that I think about my subconscious as like a fog or like a swamp. That there's this like barrier between my conscious brain and my unconscious brain. And then sometimes arbitrarily, it seems like hands will reach out through the fog and like present me with a gift from my subconscious. And I was writing this record in a really condensed timeline. I was really stressed about it. But I did a lot of, I think a shower is a really good place to write songs. It's really meditative, and your voice sounds good in it. And I was in the shower, and I just like something, it was like hands came out of the fog and said, the record is called In Lieu of Flowers. And that was kind of it. And, the line from the song, which is out now, so I can just talk about it freely, which is nice, is in lieu of flowers, shake the dirt off. And it was this idea of like choosing when you're dead and buried, and understanding that you can, with the correct help, find your way out of that hole, right? That it doesn't have to be a funeral. And so to me, it was this moment of Aaron's community, his family that he's built for himself, reaching down to him and pulling him out of the grave that he's dug himself. And the understanding that that's sometimes what we need. And it just kind of became like a central tenet of the album and made a lot of sense for a title track.
And why are we starting here? Why is this the first single when, it's a sort of a resolution place in the story. This is the
penultimate song, yeah.
Yeah.
Picking singles for this is really hard. Mm-hmm. Because it's this balancing act between narrative and song and like and then like there's all of the like less fun parts, the less arty parts of releasing songs where you're like, which one will do well at playlisting and which one will do well with the fucking algorithm or whatever. But I think that what we came to is we had picked the five, you're going to get five, the 5 songs.
Get ready.
that we're going to release before the album comes out. And we were trying to figure out the order. I know it's like almost like a TV trope, right? It's like the record scratch, like, yup, that's me. And I bet you're wondering how I got here. But I do kind of like that storytelling device where you show people like a little bit of the story close to the end, and it raises all these questions. And for this song, they're there, right? Who is Sam? Who is Eric? Who are we apologizing to and why? And then we're going to kick you back to close to the beginning. And that's where we're going to start the rest of the album rollout. So you get this like little bit of the end, but it really gives you more questions than it does answers, which I think is a fun narrative thing. And that married nicely with the fact that we just like, we love this song and we love the bombast of it. And all of like the kind of exciting elements that are in this that we just felt like really worked to show off a lot of different dimensions of the record. So it worked both from a song standpoint and from a narrative standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that that's a great way to talk about how huge and explosive this song is. It's one of my favorite songs on the record, and it is truly just so kind of triumphant and enormous, and the bridge kind of explodes in this sort of pyrotechnic way. And I think this song and the opening track, which you guys will not get to hear yet, have these sort of enormous kind of Springsteenian arrangements, this very kind of like E Street horns, strings. It feels very cinematic. We've been talking about this as a kind of TV show. And I would love for you to talk about those dynamics and how this kind of huge sort of orchestral arrangement came to be, because to me it feels like this very almost like I was explaining to you the sort of 20th Century Fox like horn sound, or like MGM, you know, it's like this lion, like this sort of gold, like big Hollywood feeling. And I would love to talk about how that happened when, you know, so much of Aaron West's project is like this kind of sad guy with his guitar on the road.
Yeah.
And how does he, you know, end up back with this community?
First of all, I think Springsteenian is a good note for it. And the other like touchstone musically for it was the polyphonic spree, where I just love like this like big band feel. And I think the Springsteen touchstone is interesting, because I think one of the things that I've always loved the most about the E Street Band was that it genuinely seemed like they were having fun and they loved doing it together. And I think that that's one of the most fun things about the Roaring Twenties too, is that like the people that play in the Roaring Twenties largely are not touring musicians. Some of them are musicians by trade, but they're like piano teachers, guitar teachers. Some of them work just 9 to 5 jobs. And so when we get the opportunity to be out there on tour, there's like a joy that I don't want to say is missing from full-time touring acts. It obviously is not, right? If people don't like doing it, they probably won't do it. But there's almost this kind of novel joy to it. And I love that. And I wanted to continue cultivating it. And so I was like, I just keep adding more people. He's like, let me just put more of my friends in this thing and have more people involved. And it ended up that there are 16 people that play on this album.
So crazy.
16 people play on the record. And this is the only song on the record where all 16 are present on the same song at the same time, which narratively lends itself to it as well, right? It's the community surrounding Aaron and saying, in lieu of flowers, shake the dirt off.
I'm with you till the bitter
I'm with
end.
you till the bitter end. And then I think as far as the string arrangements and it feeling cinematic, I think that's about the players and it's about Christine, who leads the string section, our cellist Christine Cruda, who is the only person on the record with a Grammy. But the entire string section plays on...
So far.
It actually wouldn't surprise me if Slow-Mo had a Grammy. If our lap steel player had a Grammy, just never said it to me.
Totally.
It would totally make sense. He's played on so much stuff. The string section plays on a lot of Broadway productions. And so they are scoring things in a very cinematic way all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think it makes sense that, and the way that I described the project to them and what we were trying to do in the storytelling element, I think that that's the direction they went with it. And so a lot of the credit goes to them. A lot of the credit goes to all the players. A lot of the credit goes to Ace, who wrote the brilliant horn hook for the song that recurs throughout it. But yeah, I think really it's about the joy of playing music together. It's about so many people. Like, why have 16 people? It's like, well, the answer is because it's fun. Like, and it's supposed to feel fun to make music with people. And it seems that this project gets to be more fun the more people we bring in. So we brought in more people.
Totally. I mean, and I think as the penultimate song on the record, before the kind of finale, which everyone will also have to wait for, I think it's so beautiful that it also feels like this send-off where Aaron is once again surrounded by his family. I mean, his sister as part of the band, but also his friends and the people who have been with him along the way, sort of sending him off into the final chapter. It's like this kind of reunion before the hero has his sort of solo venture. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I think that it feels like its own kind of conclusion. And I think starting with this song also establishes sort of what's at stake and how far he's come. And I think I want to talk a little bit more about the line that the title comes from, which, it's like you say, I'll write in wet cement, in lieu of flowers, shake the dirt off. I'm with you till the bitter end. And it's not just for me this image of sort of eschewing a funeral, of saying, I'm not, we don't need to cut our losses yet. I know that I've experienced so much grief, and Aaron has. I mean, the griefs that have accrued over the course of these 3 records are tremendous. But I think that it also has to do with him returning to a place where he's able to accept futurity and possibility. And this idea of writing in wet cement, of allowing something to harden and ossify. And I think that it kind of calls back for me that, Sam, who is a character who we'll learn about, is willing to write on the pavement for him, sort of feels in conversation with Diane, leaving him a letter that is sort of something that can be thrown out or lost or is impermanent.
Yep.
And there's this exchange that happens that's him accepting the possibility of pain, but allowing somebody to make their mark for him again. And I just think that I would love for you to just speak to his sort of journey.
Well, I think that the thing about it is that there's, and what we kind of have addressed through the hype up of this record, is that there's all of these wounds that are opened for him, and a lot of them are never closed. And they're just kind of pushed to the side while other things happen. And that's not a way to find any sort of permanent solution, right? I think that when we have traumatic events in our lives or things that we're struggling with, and we ignore them, it can feel like they go away, and they may temporarily go away, but they will always resurface. It was supposed to be like a lasting agreement with himself that he would actually
a vow.
It was meant to be a vow to himself that he would actually work towards it this time. Yeah. That there would be like a permanent sense of trying to heal these wounds instead of letting them exist and trying to coexist with them. Yeah. There was actual work being put in. I think that was, it runs, and I love the transitory nature of like a note, and then the permanence of writing something that's going to harden and stay forever. That this time we're going to try to get it right and keep it right.
And I think there's something sweet too about the fact, and I want to talk about the imagery in this song and in the record. But I think it's sweet that this song opens, they're in the parked car, which is a sort of callback to an earlier song, Monongahela Park, on the record, with Sam. And there's a sort of recurrent image of them working through this in the car. And Aaron has been such a nomadic figure, and he's driving by himself. I mean, there are cars all over his sort of discography. His father's car, him driving alone down the coast, the Thunderbird Inn. Like these are all the sort of car analogies, which I want to talk about later with Whiplash also.
Sure.
I want to talk about how the song starts with Aaron parked in the car with Sam, and that previously, when he was in the car with them on an earlier track on Monongahela Park, there are these sort of recurrent images of them kind of working through their past. And that in this instance, he feels comfortable enough to sort of sit in it with them. And he's obviously freaking out. No one's seen him without his clothes on in over a decade. He's in this moment of actual kind of panic and like self-effacement, but also I think real hope. And I think that he's just reached this place where he's able to face things, and it's because of the people around him like Sam who have shown him the grace that he's able to kind of receive love again and to sort of be seen. And I want to talk about sort of these images, especially on this song, And I know that this image was really resonant for you. It was almost one of the contenders for the title of this podcast, but, rain on the roof of your parked car. And I want to talk about how that setting is important for you and what it sort of evokes as the intro to the song.
Well, I think when we've talked about this before, but I think that the idea of setting and like what you can get across by showing really simple things and what more it can tell you. And so I think when you hear the line rain on the roof of your parked car, and we understand that we're in Sam's driveway, but in a car for this apology, I think the thing that you understand is that whatever happened earlier on the record hurts Sam enough that they don't want to let Aaron into the house. That Aaron has come here to apologize and to make things right. But you imagine them Aaron going to Sam's front door and not being allowed through the threshold yet, right? Because you haven't actually done the act of apologizing and you haven't done the act of showing them that you have evolved and worked on yourself in this way that is like actually useful and beneficial. And so that conversation, I think just by knowing that the conversation is happening in a car in the driveway tells you so much more about the tension that built to that moment than if it were to happen in the foyer. And so a lot of it's there. And then I think that you're right. I think there's this journey throughout the album where Aaron has to get to a place where he can trust himself to be vulnerable. And obviously that is a new development when we get to this song, right? That's what we're getting at. But I do think that, like you're saying, the settings are really important. And later in the song, you get the simple line, box fan sings in your window. And I just think that tells you so much about the house and and the socioeconomic climate of the home, the neighborhood that it's in, that it doesn't have central air, that you need to have a box fan in the window, and what that tells you about the family and about how they grew up. All of these little details, I think, have so much more in them. And when you picture the scene, you picture a bedroom with a box fan in a window. When you picture a scene and you picture people having a conversation in the driveway, in the car, instead of the house, you just learn so much more about the characters and about the setting and about how they came to these places in their lives.
Exactly. I mean, and then the sort of image selection and detail selection is so significant with songwriting in particular. It's such it's a kind of artistic medium of concision and of economy. And when you're trying to essentially distill a television series into a collection of songs, you have to be really selective with the way that you are setting these images. You don't have the luxury of a visual medium. And so you want to present things,
Yeah, or of time, right? Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's always drawn me to songwriting is the constriction. Is like, okay, well, you have probably 3 to 5 minutes for most songs to get out an entire vision, an entire narrative. And so how can we tell you a lot by telling you a little?
Yeah.
And I think that those image selections are huge for that. I spend a lot of time thinking about what details give you the most narrative.
Mm-hmm. So I also wanted to know sort of when in the process of making this album, you wrote this song, when this part of the story, when you felt ready to kind of tell this part of the resolution for Aaron, and how you came to the hook and the bridge, which is so triumphant and beautiful and powerful. And it feels like he had to really go through the kind of hero's journey in order to even arrive here sonically in some ways. And I know that you co-wrote this with Ace.
Yeah.
And
it was the last song written for the record.
Crazy, yeah.
So I guess I should say that when I had this big plan for how I was going to write this record, I was going to do a lot of the groundwork for it while on tour, on this Wonder Years tour that we were on. And the first day of the tour, I woke up and I couldn't move my right arm. They thought I tore my rotator cuff. It turned out there was like a calcific tendonitis in it, which is just like basically like a kidney stone in your tendon, from what I understand.
That sounds really rad.
And it was like cutting the bursa open. And so I was in a sling the whole tour. I couldn't play guitar. And so basically I got home from that tour and I was like, okay, I have like basically, I think it was like 8 weeks, 9 weeks to write this entire record. And I got really close, but I didn't quite get there. And so when I got into the studio with Ace, I was like, we still have to write like basically 2 songs.
The songs.
And one of them is like one of the key moments of the record. And I think I drove him insane. We went through so many different iterations of this. and I kind of knew some of the lyrics. I had the ideas, I had the images. A lot of times when I'm writing for this project, I see the scene in my brain, but I don't have it broken out into lyrics yet because like I understand what's going to happen, but I need to hear some of the music to understand how that is going to fit into the structure of a song. We played with so many, probably 3 different ideas that ended up in the trash, and I could see Ace was just getting really frustrated with me because I was like, it's not right, it's not right, it's not right. And that's a really frustrating thing to hear as a songwriter. And he landed on that ba ba da ba ba da ba ba da ba ba hook. And we both kind of knew like, okay, well, that's it.
Yeah.
And we had found a chorus that we really liked, and it had that. Sometimes I just need to give somebody else the guitar and just sing over what they're doing, because there's this tendency to, when you pick up a guitar, to play the thing that you most commonly will play. And so, especially when you're like running low on ideas and you're feeling stuck and you feel a little bit creatively exhausted, sometimes it's good to just give somebody else one element of it, to take away one of the things, you can concentrate on another. And so Ace was playing, and I was like, oh, I found like where the In Lieu of Flowers fit into the chorus, and we built this chorus, and we had this horn hook, and we had a verse, and I just was not feeling the verse. I just knew that there was something else there. And I drove home.
Did something else happen in the song? Like, was there a plot that changed?
No, I just didn't like how the verse, I felt like it needed to sink down into the verse, and there needed to be like this first verse needed to be musically smaller and more intimate so that you could have that conversation in the car. I knew that I needed that moment, and I knew that I needed the third verse to be even smaller than that, and an even more intimate conversation when Aaron's talking to Colin and apologizing. And so I went home and I restructured the verse, and I came in the next day, and it was the first day that Nick was there, and we were getting ready to get started. I was like, oh, Ace, I changed that song again. And I was like, he's going to go through the ceiling. You could just tell he was like, no, we had
like,
it.
You're fired.
He was like, we had it.
Yeah.
And I was like, we had a lot of it. And I was like, I promise you, I'm not getting rid of these 2 great elements. I just want to change this verse, please. And, you could tell at first there was this like, well, it's your song, whatever. And then when we started playing it, I think we all got it and realized that it was the right thing. But sometimes it takes that kind of like collaborative back and forth and like almost tension to get to where it's like, I knew this part was right. I knew this part was right. This part just felt wrong for my vision of how these conversations were going to take place. And eventually we got there. One other thing I was thinking about, just because I mentioned the third verse and what I call the Colin verse, right? Yeah. In my brain, there's the Sam verse, the 20s verse, and the Colin verse. And the birthday gifts that Aaron gives Colin. And one of them is a notebook. And I just want to mention that like one of the things I think is really cool about it is that in the deluxe version of the LP, it's going to come with Aaron's journal, where at the beginning of touring on this, he buys a journal and journals through this. And so there's this journal that is going to come with the record where it's in Aaron's voice, and it's entries that go along with and like accompany the songs and like give more details and tell more story that you would otherwise not get. And I love that through the process of doing this, Aaron decides he needs to pass on this like ritual of writing to his nephew. And I just thought that was just kind of a cool little.
It's so sweet. I mean, and it's also like him sitting next to, it's like Colin sitting next to Aaron at the piano. And, like if you like this song, I'll teach you how to play it. Like there's this creative, like paternalism that is so sweet. It's like this inherited, Aaron's kind of intergenerational trauma is so robust. And to be like, what I'm going to pass down is not this trauma, not these struggles with addiction or these, ghosts in my bloodline, if you will. So just a little Easter egg for the fans back home. But instead, this creative impulse and this tendency towards self-expression, or like allowing Colin to be reflective in ways that I think Aaron maybe wished that he could have.
Yeah, and I think coming around to that and being like, oh, it's useful for me to write these things out. And then as part of like the apology to be like, I think this would be useful for you too, is, for these 2 people who have lost their fathers, and for Aaron to pass that ritual to him, I thought was cool. And I thought just kind of a cool tie-in to the journal and all the extra that you would get with that. So
absolutely.
I think we hit it all on this song.
Yeah. Well, I am excited that it's out in the world and that people can listen to it. And I hope that this was edifying and interesting to hear about the peel behind the curtain.
And we have 4 more of these that we're going to do.
4 more.
And we're probably going to get better at it.
Yeah.
We're not going to get worse, right?
No, totally.
So if you liked it, there'll be more.
Yeah. Thank you.
And if you
guys.
didn't like it, there'll be more. And
There
maybe
will
it'll
be more
better.
either way.
Either way, it's coming.
Yeah. So
get used to
really,
it.
Yeah, I guess you
It's
guys
like
have
get
to
used
just
to
kind
it
of
thing.
figure it out.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening. And this was really fun.
And I've been Dan.
I've been Holden.
And this is...
This
what are we calling it?
Singing at Brick Walls.
And Aaron West in the West of the Roaring 20s in Lieu of Flowers deep dive podcast mini-series.
Episode by episode.
Episode 1.
Recalling
the
stories behind the story.
Great.
That's the full title. Anyway,
That's it.
thanks, guys.
Run it.